Now, for more analysis, that is, on the Chinese Basketball Association regular season and a look ahead to the playoffs, we are joined in the studio by CBA expert, sports scene's very own Damion Jones. So, Damion, we just saw highlights of two key games. We saw the matchups, the early matchups, and the way the playoffs are going to shape up. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? Who's looking good? Who should we keep an eye on?
All right, so let's start with those games from last night. And first of all, obviously, it's always great discussing basketball with you. But basically, in last night's game, the key game was Liaoning versus Shandong, which we saw at the top of the program. Liaoning needed to beat Shandong to get into the top four. And unfortunately for Shandong, the loss knocked them out of the top four. As you mentioned during the standings, that's because those four teams, Shandong, Beijing, Xinjiang, and Liaoning all ended up with the same record, and it came down to tiebreakers. So Beijing took care of business against Tianjin. That moved them up to third. Liaoning moved up to fourth, Xinjiang fifth, and as we just said, Shandong dropped down to sixth.
Now, can you also explain a little bit more just the format for the playoffs, how these are going to set up and lead up to the finals?
Okay, you got into that a little bit with the preview of the playoffs, but the first round, that's best of three. The quarterfinals and semifinals, those are going to be best of five as we get more games as we go deeper. And then the classic format for the CBA finals, best of seven.
So obviously those top four teams getting that bye is huge. They get a chance to rest their players, to regather and regroup, but also it leaves them, less than fresh. There's nothing to keep your players in shape like game time, obviously. So who are some of the teams to watch? I mean, we've talked about it, Beijing sneaking into the third spot, three-time defending champions Liaoning perhaps peaking at the right time and earning that fourth spot. In fifth, you've got Xinjiang, obviously last year's runners-up. They've been great this season. So who do you have your eye on?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to start with the team that won the regular season going away. That is the Guangzhou Lions. Obviously, they're two-time runners-up, having lost to Liaoning in the finals in 2018 and then again in 2022. But the last few years, they've always been one of those teams to keep your eye on. And this year, in my opinion, they've got some of the best players in the league. We'll get into the individual issues in a little bit. But basically, got to watch Guangzhou. Liaoning, as you said, peaking at the right time. Three-time defending champions, 4 titles overall, veteran roster. They're rested and healthy. And there's no way you can count out Liaoning once you get into the playoffs. And remember, with Guangzhou being seeded first and Liaoning fourth, that could be a semifinal matchup, and that's possibly dangerous for Guangzhou.
Now, somebody that we seem to be overlooking a little bit in all this is the second seed, Shanxi. Do they deserve to be overlooked? What chance do you think they've got?
Shanxi is a very interesting team this season, and yeah, I do think they're being overlooked a little bit, but you can't count them out. They have a great, they've been anchored on the international side by Brandon Goodwin, who's come in and he's been with them all season, Hamidou Diallo as well. So you're talking about somebody who's played some big minutes in the NBA. On the Chinese side, they've got Zhang Ning, one of the toughest young players in the league, the great three-point shooter Yuan Shuai, a bunch of other veterans. But it's been really interesting because they've used 11 different international players this season. They're tied with Nanjing for the all-time CBA record, and we'll get into the rule changes in a little bit. But it's interesting because they've been kind of up and down in a lot of turmoil, but they've kept winning all season.
One of the interesting things this year has been the sheer number of foreign players that have changed teams. Can you tell us a little bit about the foreign player format and other individuals to watch? Because, of course, as we've seen in the past, the foreign players do not make or break the team. It is really the Chinese teams, the Chinese players' depth that you need to win championships. So who among the players should we be looking at? And again, can you explain a bit more about the foreign players and some of those changes we've seen?
All right, so with the format, while Yao Ming was in charge, he decided to change the rules to make it only one foreign player could be on the court at a time throughout the whole game. Before the pandemic years, they were basically allowed to have 2 foreign players on the court for 2 quarters, and then for the other 2 quarters, it was just 1. This year, they decided to get a little bit bolder and change the rules with the idea of making the games more exciting and integrating more of the team. So now you can have 2 foreign players on the court for 3 quarters, and then in the 4th quarter, it's just 1. At least that's how most of the teams tend to play. Now, as far as some of the players that we need to be keeping our eye on, I think you've got to start with the players from Guangzhou. Barry Brown, he's an experienced guard who's been in the league a couple of years, was previously with the Beijing Ducks several years back, but he's now come back and joined Guangzhou, and he's really been the most consistent international player this season, and in my opinion, the top pick for best international player. We'll see how that all pans out. There's a lot of players with great stats and different intangibles. And then there's his teammate, Hu Jin-cho, also a former MVP, and he's had the most consistent numbers, in my opinion, of the Chinese players this season. So he could be in line for, once again, a second MVP honor. Again, there's a lot of players that are having good seasons, and we'll see what the voting comes down to. As far as Liaoning, obviously Kyle Fogg is the reigning Finals MVP. They've got Zhao Ji-wei, who has, of course, preceded him as the two-time Finals MVP. Veteran players like Han De-jun, Li Xiaoshu, and Zhang Jinlin has missed most of the season, but he came back in the third phase. So you mentioned earlier, peaking at the right time. Liaoning, those are the players that are going to drive them. Now, Xinjiang, last year's runners-up, they've been kind of having some injury problems this season and a slight bit of inconsistency with just deciding on which international players, but this third phase, they brought in Montrezl Harrell, formerly of the LA Clippers, Lakers, and several teams, former NBA Sixth Man of the Year. I think he's just rounding into shape, but we'll see if he can make an impact as they go forward down the stretch. For some of the teams lower in the standings, Zhejiang, I watched them last week, come back from 15 points down against the Beijing Ducks. So basically, if they get hot, it's hard to stop them. And one of the players on their team to keep an eye on is Gabe York. He's a sharp shooting guard, drilled a bunch of threes to key that comeback. And of course, the former Golden State Warrior Damion Jones, my namesake. And of course, he's to go along with that veteran core of Wu Qian, Chung Shui-peng, Lu Wenbo, Lu Zhi, and several others. So veteran team, and they're being complemented by the Chinese players. There was a player I know you've said several times this season you've been impressed with, and that's Shanghai's Kenneth Lofton. So what do you see in him?
Well, he's such a huge presence. He is such a physical, strong player, and he's got the moves. He's got fantastic handles. He's a great finisher. He can shoot inside and outside, and just that strength in the paint has been tremendous. He's been putting up 40-point games coming down the stretch. Shanghai had that fantastic run. Their winning streak was stopped, but it looks like they could be a factor too. You know, in past years, it's always been sweeps in the early stages. So some of these teams basically 5th place to 12th haven't really factored. So I think this year there's been so much parity. We saw 4 teams finish with records of 32 and 14. So I think this could be a year where we really see some parity. But before we get to prognostications, I want to ask you a little bit more about some of the intangible factors. At this point in the season, health is such an important issue, and the depth. So talk to us a bit about injuries.
Okay, so Kenneth Lofton, his teammate Eric Bledsoe, and we should mention for Shanghai, the CBA this year for the first time held a CBA Club Cup during the middle of the season. Shanghai won that. Eric Bledsoe was named the MVP. Kenneth Lofton obviously played a great role in their success, along with Wang Zhilin, their former MVP and really one of the great Chinese centers. But with Eric Bledsoe out, he suffered a midsection injury, and he's not going to be back. That's going to really affect them because he's the one who pulls the team together, running the floor from the point as well as being a shooting guard. So that's an intangible right there. How is the health going to hold up for these teams? Another team with possibly a health issue to worry about, Guangzhou. Again, they've dominated the regular season, but their point guard, Sun Mingwei, late down the stretch, he fractured his heel. He's going to try to come back for the playoffs, and hopefully he can get back, but we don't know how effective he's going to be. And in that Beijing-Zhejiang game that I mentioned from last week, Zhou Qi, Beijing center, he was poked in the eye while fighting for a rebound. So luckily they've got that bye, and they're hoping that he can come back and it won't be too much of an impact for their team. Now, it's also for the Ducks. Chen Chun missed time with injuries earlier. He's the point guard who, along with Zhou Qi, joined as a free agent in the offseason. And then their exciting young player, Zhong Fanbo. He also missed time with injuries, but he's really been peaking lately. He spent some time during one of the breaks with the national team, and that's really seemed to boost his confidence. He's throwing down dunks. He's playing defense, blocking shots, and this is his 3rd year in the league. He was in a G League over in the U.S. 4 years ago. He didn't get drafted, but he's once again now caught the eye of the NBA scouts. So that's going to be also possibly a motivating factor for him.
All right, now, Damion, you're sitting in the hot seat. I'm not letting you go without a prediction. So Who is your pick? Who is going to take home the title this year? Who do you think is going to be in the finals?
Okay, even before we get to that, I mean, these 12 teams, most of them were so close together in the standings. These first-round series, I don't think it's going to be all sweeps, as you said we've seen in several years. It's going to be close, and we've got some teams that are finishing lower down than you're used to seeing them finish. Zhejiang's 9, they're going against Qingdao, who's 8. And Qingdao obviously has Yang Han-sin, who's one of the great young Chinese players, and they've got some great imports in Quindary Weatherspoon, Miles Powell, and Jordan Mickey. But I think they could be right for a mild 8-9 upset. As far as you think about who's 7th? Guangdong, the Southern Tigers, the all-time record 11-time champions. They've got one of the best coaches in the CBA, Du Feng. They've got Eric Moreland and Troy Gillenwater, who are two of the most experienced foreign players. And Xu Jie, he's obviously, it's really weird to think of him as being improved because he's been around for 6 or 7 years, but he's really had, because of Hu Mingxuan's injury, he's had to play a lot of point guard and a lot of minutes, and he's really put up a lot of much higher numbers than he's done in the past. So it could be really interesting with Guangdong possibly making a run from the 7th spot. You mentioned, obviously, Shandong's dropped to 6. I would say their coach, Cho Biao, is really underrated. And even though they fell out of that bye on the final day, they could really make a run in the playoffs as well. And Xinjiang, last year's runners-up, 2017 champions, they're 5th. They've got Abdusalam Abdurrashid, last season's most valuable player, dealt with some injuries this season, and we'll see what they can do. And then, of course, there's the top 4. So I'm not going to predict every series, but let's get to the semifinals. I'm thinking Liaoning and Guangxia. If they meet in the again, they've met in the finals twice. If they meet in the semifinals, that could be prime for an upset for Guangxia. Liaoning is the 3-time defending champions. Going for a 4th, possibly, I don't know, but I'm possibly calling that they could upset Guangxia. Now, on the other side, we've got Beijing as the 3rd seed, Shanxi as the 2nd seed. But the danger for Shanxi, we've said they've been underrated even though they've been winning all season. Well, they're going to be in the 2-7 game going against Guangdong. So that could be a possible upset in the quarterfinals.
All right.
Which brings us
Quickly, we're running out of time here, so I'm going to ask one last. Who's going to be number 1?
I'm hedging. I don't want to make a call. I think we're going to see Liaoning and Beijing in the final, and I'm not making a call.
Well, I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to say it's Guangxia Liaoning in the final, and Guangxia takes it home this time. They are due. Damion, fantastic. Thank you very much. All your analysis of the CBA, good stuff. We are going to take